Welcome back. Go follow me on Instagram at bsticks.production and you can cop this sample for free. The link will be in the description. So we're going to get into it now. Let's go. So I started with this progression in D minor and I worked it out as A sharp major 7th to a D minor 9 to a G minor 9. That was the first 4 bars. Then the second 4 bars, so it's an 8-bar phrase, was A sharp major 7 to an A altered chord, altered dominant chord, which is basically like a passing chord. Then I went to the D minor 9 and I just embellished it with a couple of melody notes here and there. So if I play that for you, just how it sounded, it sounds like this. When I wrote this, I was thinking about melody as always, and don't watch this. For some reason, it's peaking even though I've got a limiter on the master. I don't know what's going on. Something's playing up with my computer. Anyway, hopefully it sounds all right. So the patch that I used was from the Sky Keys. I'm loving this plugin at the moment. If you haven't checked it out, go cop it. Apparently this vibrato section models the pedal that I've got, the Fairfield Circuits shallow water pedal that I use all the time as well on my guitar and also on synths, but it sounds really good and I love this August flute patch. It just gave me a nice starting bed to get the sample going from. I added a bit of processing, not too much, nothing too major because I thought the sound was good as it was. But I started with this lossy, which if you've seen my tutorials before, you'll know that I love this plugin. Then I went for just Logic stock phaser. So together they were starting to just make the sound a bit more trippy, a bit more dreamy, and I really like that. And then I just literally filtered some low end out, so I was leaving space for the bass and some other sounds that I had in mind. I bounced it out here, as you can see, and then I just put 2 sound shifters on it, pitching it up by an octave each time. The first one sounded like this. And when I put the next one on, it sounds really, really interesting as a kind of high texture. You can really hear the phaser come out in it as well. So I added that and I also put some top end to that as well. So together now we had a really, really good bed that took up a lot of sonic space. Very emotional and really set the tone for what I was going for. And the interesting thing here is that I turned this sound to mono, as you can see clicking this little icon here, and I think you could do something similar in FL, but I like to put a lot of sounds into mono. Just find that helps give you that vintage sound, because back in the day it would have all really been mono. A lot of the sounds would have been mono, so you know, it just seems to sound a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. I know Keep the Truth does this a lot, and Nami as well. Next I added the bass. I normally just put the bass in after I put my main synth in, so I'm just going to move it up here so you guys can have a look. And the MIDI is nothing too exciting here, but if I just play it together with the synths, you've got one thing that I did differently was I slid these notes into each other instead of just having them static like this. So on like the lead up to bar 7, you can hear. So it almost sounds like the bass is just sliding up. Something a bit different I haven't shown before in my tutorials. And then again, a couple of little fills at the end of each phrase, like the end of the 8 bars, just got a little walking down fill there that just helps to transition into the next section. Something that I love to do as well is to have little transitions that almost anticipate the next section. And you can try that too. Again with bass fills or maybe sometimes percussion fills or even a synth that comes in. I do it a lot with ear candy sounds as well. I find that really sounds good. So at this point we had the 3 sounds going. So next I wanted to add in a vocal sample that really gave me that old school vintage 90s R&B feel. And what I often do is I go to Arcade. I don't use Arcade too much, but for vocals I really like it. So I pulled in this patch from the Hooked called Personal History, and again if we just solo it on its own without the processing, it sounded like this. So you can see I pitched it up an octave. I don't like to put vocals down in the same range as the vocal that the artists might be singing in, because it can be very distracting, I feel, when the artist is trying to get a melody together to write the song. So often I just pitch it up by 12 or sometimes down by 12, but I felt that down by 12 was going to be too muddy for this sample. So let's look at the processing on these vocals. So I started with an EQ, just filtered it out, almost like a telephone EQ here. So if I just play that for you, really filtering it a lot into the mid-range there. Added a reels. You've seen me before, I use this a lot on my vocal samples. Just a basic initial preset. I added Valhalla vintage verb there, doing quite a lot of reverb because I wanted it quite washed out this time. A shaper box in which I'm just literally panning the sound from left to right. I love using that as well. Then auto filter, which is doing some heavy lifting. If I take it off, you'll hear where we are. If I put it back on, I'm adding some resonance as well with the filter, so you can hear it kind of opening as the sample goes along, and I like that because it evolves and it gives it movement, and movement's always good in samples. It stops things getting boring. And then lossy with it on a really, really high setting for this, because I really wanted to make it sort of completely unintelligible as to what it was saying. So I then bounced this vocal out, and this was my bounce vocal, and I just monoed it again and left it just going down the center because it was already moving from left to right. So if I then solo what we have so far, it sounds like this. Really nice, giving us that R&B flavour. The next things which are really fun and I really love to add was a little bit of texture. So again, this first texture here, and this is from Louis' YSE pack. It sounds like this. And I added some processing to this. Again, a little bit of, to put it in key, a little bit of sound shifter, some RC20, vintage verb, where I really washed it out, really wanted it to really sound washed out on that one, and a lot of EQ. And again, I'll bring in all the textures. This little texture was from my my Therme pedal, just sounds like this. Again, I washed it out, and I also put this glitchy plugin on it, and the preset called In and Out, to really make it sound even more glitchy. And then this little phrase again from Louis, which goes like this. So then I added this metallic fire, which you know I've used in other samples, and I also added a bit of side chaining to it to just bring it in and out, give it a little bit of bounce. So I then added this percussion, a snap, which I thought sounded really nice, just on the 2s and 4s, and I panned that to the right, made it mono. So on this snap, I put some interesting effects actually to give it movement and give it some more bounce. If you've seen me before, you know I like to use this plugin a lot, and I use this spring reverb, but I automated this part of it so that you get kind of different variations of how wet and dry the sound are as the sample develops. So the cool thing about this effect rack is the more that I brought out the other effect, the more you're going to hear this effect. So they kind of like complement each other and go hand in hand. So check this out. Did you hear this one here? This one really, really, you could hear the effect rack effect coming through. Just giving it like that kind of effect, which I thought sounded really cool, and in the mix sounds great as well. Added a couple extra sounds for the ear as well. This little beep, little percussion sort of beep there. This freaky sign is from Monty Booker's kit, as is this FF main synth. And again, together, we've got this kind of blend going on. With all the phrases and textures. So it's creating a really interesting sonic bed for our sample to sit on top of. And again, I would really recommend you do this as well. Just bring in different sounds, like almost like take your phone out and just record like sounds of the birds, or clicking your fingers, or maybe like sing some weird random things into your phone and then just put them onto the computer and just stick them into samples in different places and pan them around and just see what you can come up with, see what it can add to your samples, because you know, you don't want boring samples. That's the worst thing. Like, so all together now, we've got something really interesting. So we move on to the B section. B section is pretty similar, but I use the same MIDI information. Maybe I moved a couple of notes around. I think I developed the bass a little bit, and I just kind of changed a couple of notes here and there. And I also brought a piano in, but I bounced that piano down. I put the same MIDI that I used from before. I strummed out the notes a little bit manually. In Logic, I always like to do that manually. I've said that before because the auto function is terrible and it sounds very robotic. So you can see that these notes have been strummed this way. Some notes have been strummed this way, just to make things sound more natural. I used this capstan upright piano. Really interesting EQ because I just wanted to really push the mid-range on this. RC20 Vintage Verb, my texture plugin that you've seen before. Just adding some extra texture to that sound, although it's already quite a textured sound. I copied the MIDI onto this sound as well from Sky Keys, which I'll just play for you guys. Moving from left to right. It's moving from left to right. It's got some pitch kind of drift on it as well, so it really sounds lo-fi. And also, to even add to that, I've put lossy, got my filter going again on that same rising patch that I had from before, and that's really cool. And they sound good together. The piano and that synth, so they formed the kind of bed for this again. What I did was, just like in the last one, I didn't think that there was enough high end, so I bounced the piano out and did my little sound shifter trick. So you've got this. Really cool, and again adds a lot of high-end energy to the sample. I added this pedal note. This is a very interesting technique I've spoken about before. Just one note going through the whole sound. And what I've done here is I've automated a pitch shifter to go up and down and just give us some more interest to make it sort of sound really strange and go up and down volume wise. And you're getting this from left to right as well. So again, loads of panning, loads of movement, loads of pitch drifting, just adds to that vintage flavour. Last section of the sample, I just muted the vocal and I brought the bass back in, but I slightly changed some of the fills on the bass to give it variation. Again, I never want things to sound like they're just MIDI repeating. I always want them to sound almost like they're alive, like real musicians have played it. So that's always in the back of my mind when I'm programming, like to think, how would a real musician have done this? So often I'll humanize things in the Logic MIDI roll, or I'll move notes about so they don't exactly start on the grid, and all that gives extra sort of human feeling to the sample. So hopefully you got something out of this today, guys, and I appreciate the support. Grab this free sample and I'll catch you on the next one.